Hi, my name is Batuhan,
And I'm Shain.
and today we're going to talk to you about fuel cell technology for hybrid and electric vehicle applications. The technology of fuel cells has come a long way since its first major implementation during the Cold War. It was first a technology that was considered experimental in the first stages, and around the 60s and 70s there was a heavy investment in the technology to further it for different applications for transportation and stationary applications. Basic background on fuel cells. They generate electricity through chemical reaction. And while that may sound similar to traditional rechargeable batteries for hybrid and electric vehicles, they are different in the sense that there is no recharging because the fuel cells have a fuel source. And the most common fuel source is hydrogen, which is what mainly we'll be talking about. Like I said, there's a difference between the battery and the fuel cell, and fuel cells have fuel in the form of hydrogen that powers them. Some of the benefits of fuel cells, along with other non-fossil fuel-based energy for vehicle use, is that they save the environment in the sense that there's a lot less waste product that goes on from the harvesting of the fossil fuels, a lot less pollution that comes about from the operation of the traditional internal combustion engines, and the energy dependence. Right now the United States imports somewhere around 40% of the fuel that's used strictly for transportation, whether it be trucks or cars on the highway systems here within the country. While there are a lot of benefits to using fuel cells in vehicles, there are also downsides as well too. For instance, the global consumption of other elements and chemicals goes up that normally wasn't used, such as there'll be a substitute for fossil fuels. And while fossil fuels will go down, and like I said, the benefits, we will reach those benefits, there will be a negative side where the goods that we hadn't consumed before will start to be consumed. Like another benefit that comes with a negative side is that while the noise pollution goes down from us not using internal combustion engines, we will have the thermal pollution will go up as more electric and hybrid and fuel cell type vehicles are implemented, specifically electric vehicles based off electricity with recharging, because power plant production will have to go up, or output will have to go up, which generates significant amounts of heat, especially around the power plant areas. Well, the first technology, fuel cell technology that I'm going to talk to you about today is the alkaline fuel cell. The alkaline fuel cell is the most prevalent, and it's been used most widely throughout the initial implementation of fuel cells. It produces power through the redox reaction between oxygen and hydrogen. And like I said, it's one of the older technologies, and it was actually implemented widely in the Apollo missions and in the space shuttle program in the 1980s. The overall power output efficiency of alkaline fuel cells is around 60%, and the major obstacle of this technology type for vehicle application was the storage of the hydrogen fuel. In the 60s, Chevy designed a van that used alkaline fuel cells, and while you would think that a van would typically be able to carry between 6 to 8 people, the Chevy van was only able to carry 2 because the whole rest of the back of the van stored containers of hydrogen for the fuel cell vehicle, for the engine. And technology has progressed such that the hydrogen will be condensed into smaller tanks and pressurized so that you can have a higher density of hydrogen and travel longer distances with the fuel. This leads to the second type of technology, which is the proton exchange membrane fuel cell, which is actually the leading competitor right now to replace all of the aging alkaline fuel cell based technologies around the world. The benefits of the proton exchange membrane are that they don't have as much of a efficiency potential as the alkaline fuel cells, because they're only around 40 to 60%. Even though theoretically they could achieve up to 83% off the chemical reaction process, but due to the losses in the electrical circuits and mass transport losses that occur inside the proton exchange membrane fuel cells, that number is closer to 40% with a higher range of 60%. One of the major benefits of the proton exchange membrane technology is that it is very compact. Due to this nature, it can be used for fuel cell vehicles, which Alex will talk about at the end, is that it's most likely the best candidate that we came across for mass production in fuel cell vehicles. The downside, though, is that the electrolyte membrane in the fuel cell is very sensitive. It can't be too wet or it can't be too dry, and either of these extreme conditions directly affects the output potential of the fuel cell in the vehicle. So if the conditions aren't right, then you're not going to get peak power out of your fuel cells, which is going to reduce the performance of the electricity that's fed into the motor in the fuel cell electric vehicle. And now Alex is going to talk about a few other different fuel cell technologies and whether or not they actually have applications for fuel cell electric vehicles or not.
The third fuel type cell is direct methanol fuel cells. It actually, unlike the first two, uses methanol and internally pulls the hydrogen out for the conversion. It's nice because you can actually have a methanol tank on the actual generator to power the power. So it's a relatively low heat range. It's 90 degrees to 120 degrees Celsius. It also has a relatively low efficiency, around 30%, compared to the first two, and the last three it's not that great, but it's still in a very early development phase. The fourth generation is the phosphoric acid fuel cell. It's one of the oldest generations. The electrolyte in the phosphoric acid fuel cell is phosphoric acid, and is a liquid form, and it operates at a more medium temperature range, approximately 200 degrees Celsius, and it also has an efficiency around 40%. Although that it runs very cool, it's very bulky because it's such an old generation. It's not really well suited for the electric vehicles that we use today, and it's also not efficient enough. So it's more apt for stationary generation and that type. The fifth type is molten carbonate cell. It was originally designed to use coal to power it. It uses molten carbonate as the electrolyte and runs approximately 600 degrees Celsius. It can also requires carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide on the surface of the cathode to properly function. And it's up to 50% efficient, but unfortunately the 600 degrees required temperature is too hot for fuel cell electric vehicles. And the last type we have is the solid oxide fuel cell. It uses a solid ionic conductor instead of the liquid electrolyte found in the previous types. The most common is the yttria stabilized zirconia, and it's required to sustain the high temperatures up to 1,000 degrees Celsius. Its efficiency is relatively high, 50 to 60%, but that high temperature makes it unsuitable for fuel cell electric vehicles, but very good for stationary generation. And most of those last four are really designed, the high temperature doesn't make them suitable for electric vehicles, but for large systems like generations for buildings or hospitals, they can also use that excess heat from the reaction to power electric water heaters. They can also produce boilers for heating and cooling, and they can also heat water. But for electric vehicles, they're not quite suitable. The most suitable is the PEM system, which has the highest efficiency and the most compact size while retaining the high efficiency.
All right, that's our presentation.